The Blackwell estate stood like a monument to wealth and sorrow on the hillside overlooking the city. Sophia Martinez felt the weight of its stone walls, even before she stepped through the massive front doors as a bride. The wedding had been a quiet affair, attended only by immediate family and conducted with all the warmth of a business transaction. Because that was exactly what it was. Adrian Blackwell stood at the altar in a charcoal suit that matched the storm clouds in his eyes. When the officiant asked if he took Sophia as his wife, his answer was a single word: clipped and cold. The ring he slid onto her finger felt like a shackle. When it was time for the ceremonial kiss, his lips barely grazed hers. A gesture so devoid of tenderness that Sophia felt tears threaten behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. She would not give him that satisfaction. 6 months earlier, Sophia's world had been completely different. She had been engaged to Daniel Blackwell, Adrian's younger brother. Daniel was everything his older brother was not. Warm, spontaneous, full of laughter that came easily and often. Where Adrian built empires with ruthless efficiency, Daniel painted murals in community centers and taught art to children in underserved neighborhoods. The brothers were opposite in every way, yet Daniel insisted they shared a deep bond beneath the surface differences. Sophia had loved Daniel with the kind of pure, uncomplicated joy that makes life worth living. They were planning a spring wedding, something small and intimate in a garden filled with wildflowers. Daniel would sketch their future home on napkins over breakfast, always including a studio with northern light for Sophia to continue her own painting. Those dreams ended on a rainy Tuesday night in October. The argument had been about nothing and everything. Sophia couldn't even remember how it started. Something about Daniel spending money they didn't have on art supplies for his students when they needed to save for their future. The conversation had spiraled, voices rising, until Daniel grabbed his motorcycle keys and stormed out. The police came to her door 3 hours later. He had taken a curve too fast on the coastal highway, they said. The road was slick with rain. He hadn't survived the impact. Grief is a strange companion. It makes the world feel both too sharp and too blurred at the same time. Sophia barely remembered the funeral, only Adrian's face across the grave, cold and accusing. He spoke to her once after the service, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. You killed him. Your petty arguments sent him out into that storm? He died because of you. Sophia had been too shattered to defend herself. Some part of her wondered if he was right. The guilt wrapped around her heart like iron bands. Squeezing tighter with each passing day, the marriage arrangement came through Adrian's grandfather, old Marcus Blackwell, who had built the family fortune from nothing and ruled his descendants with expectations as heavy as gold bars. His will contained a clause that surprised everyone. For Adrian to inherit full control of the Blackwell empire, he must marry within 1 year of his grandfather's death. And that wife must be someone who understood the family's values and had already been welcomed into their circle. The only woman who fit that description was Sophia. Adrian could have refused. He could have let his cousin take control of the company, but the Blackwell legacy meant everything to him. It was his identity, his purpose, the reason he worked 80-hour days and never allowed himself the luxury of rest. So he made Sophia an offer she couldn't refuse. Her father was dying of heart disease, unable to afford the surgery that might save his life. Medical bills had buried her family in debt so deep they would never climb out. Adrian would pay for everything, give her parents financial security for life, in exchange for one thing. She would become his wife, live in his home, and bear the punishment he believed she deserved for taking his brother from the world. Sophia had one night to decide. She sat beside her father's hospital bed, watching the monitors track his weakening heart, and knew she had no choice at all. Some cages are built from love rather than hate. The first weeks in the Blackwell mansion taught Sophia the many ways a person can be hurt without ever being touched. Adrian's cruelty was precise and calculated. He gave her Daniel's old room to sleep in, surrounded by paintings and photographs and memories that cut like glass. At dinner, he would recount childhood stories about his brother, always ending with a pointed reminder that Daniel was gone because of her. He bought her expensive clothes and jewelry, then commented that she looked like a child playing dress-up, trying to fit into a world where she didn't belong. The household staff treated Sophia with polite distance, unsure how to interact with a woman who was both their employer's wife and clearly his prisoner. Only Martha, the older housekeeper who had worked for the family for 30 years, showed her any kindness. She would leave fresh flowers in Sophia's room and occasionally sit with her over tea, speaking about nothing in particular, but offering the gift of simple, human warmth in a house that felt like a tomb. Sophia tried to make herself small and invisible, to endure Adrian's daily cruelties without reaction, but she had always possessed a core of strength that even grief couldn't entirely extinguish. She began to push back in small ways. When Adrian criticized her appearance, she stared at him steadily until he looked away first. When he tried to control where she went and what she did, she reminded him that he had married her, not purchased her. These moments of defiance seemed to catch him off guard, as if he had expected her to simply break under the weight of his hatred. 3 months into the marriage, something shifted. Adrian came home late one evening to find Sophia in his private study, a room she had been forbidden to enter. She stood at the window, overlooking the gardens, a glass of his expensive whiskey in her hand. When he demanded to know what she was doing there, she turned to face him with eyes that held no fear. "I'm tired of being your ghost, Adrian. I'm tired of haunting the rooms of this house, neither living nor dead. If you want to punish me, then punish me. Scream at me, tell me every terrible thing you think I am, but stop treating me like I don't exist." For a long moment, Adrian simply stared at her. In the lamplight, with her dark hair loose around her shoulders and fire in her green eyes, she looked nothing like the broken woman he had married. She looked alive and defiant and somehow more real than anything else in his carefully controlled world. The anger that had sustained him for months faltered, replaced by something more complicated and far more dangerous. He felt the unwelcome stirring of desire. "You want me to treat you like you exist?" His voice came out rough and low. "Be careful what you wish for, Sophia." He crossed the room in 3 strides and took the glass from her hand, setting it aside. They stood so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the pulse beating at his throat. The air between them crackled with tension that was part hostility and part something neither wanted to name. For one suspended moment, Sophia thought he might kiss her, and she couldn't say whether she wanted him to or not. Instead, Adrian stepped back abruptly and left the room without another word, leaving Sophia alone with her racing heart in the disturbing realization that the line between hate and desire was thinner than she had ever imagined. The next morning at breakfast, Adrian's cousin Benjamin arrived unexpectedly. Breezing into the dining room with his characteristic charm, Benjamin Blackwell was everything Adrian was not: easy with laughter, casual about wealth, interested in pleasure rather than power. He had been traveling abroad when Daniel died and had only recently returned. When he saw Sophia, his eyebrows rose in surprise. "Adrian, you dark horse? When did you get married? And why wasn't I invited?" He turned to Sophia with a warm smile. "I'm Benjamin, the family disappointment. You must be incredibly special to have caught my serious cousin's attention." Sophia glanced at Adrian, whose face had gone completely blank. "I'm Sophia. And the circumstances were rather unusual. They always are with the Blackwells," Benjamin said cheerfully, helping himself to coffee. "We're a dramatic bunch. But marriage, Adrian? I never thought I'd see the day." Daniel would have been thrilled. The mention of Daniel's name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. The ripples of tension spread outward, touching everything. Adrian's hands clenched around his newspaper, and Sophia felt the familiar guilt rise in her throat. Benjamin seemed to sense he had misstated and quickly changed the subject. But the moment had revealed something important. Not everyone in the family blamed Sophia for Daniel's death, and that small crack in the wall of condemnation felt like the first breath of air after drowning. The spring air carried the scent of blooming jasmine through the open windows of the Blackwell mansion. Sophia had been married to Adrian for 5 months, and the house had become less of a prison and more of a strange limbo where 2 people circled each other like wary animals. Neither predator nor prey, simply unsure. Benjamin's presence had changed something fundamental. He visited often, always bringing life and lightness into rooms that had grown accustomed to shadows. He made Sophia laugh, something she had forgotten how to do. More importantly, he treated her like a person rather than a symbol of tragedy. Adrian watched these interactions with growing irritation. Though he had told himself it was merely concern about his cousin's inappropriate familiarity with his wife. One afternoon, Sophia received a phone call that made her heart leap. Thomas Rivera, her best friend from art school, was back in the city after 3 years working in gallery circuits across Europe. Thomas had been her closest confidant before Daniel, the person who understood her artistic soul without needing explanation. They had been inseparable once, painting side by side in cluttered studios, arguing about technique and meaning until dawn broke over their canvases. "Heard about Daniel," Thomas said over the phone, his voice warm with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. And I heard you got married. That must have been a whirlwind. Can we meet? I've missed you terribly." Sophia agreed immediately, hungry for connection with someone from her old life. Someone who knew her as herself, rather than as Adrian's wife or Daniel's ghost. They arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place filled with mismatched furniture and local art on exposed brick walls. She didn't tell Adrian she was going out. She simply informed Martha she would be away for the afternoon and left, feeling a small thrill of rebellion. For a few hours, she could pretend to be the person she used to be. Thomas looked older, more refined, but his smile was the same bright beacon she remembered. They fell into conversation as easily as breathing, talking about his exhibitions and her abandoned paintings, carefully skirting around the grief that shadowed both their eyes. Thomas had loved Daniel too, in the way friends love the partners of those they care about, and his loss resonated through their shared history. "You look different," Thomas observed, studying her face with an artist's attention to detail. "Harder somehow, like you've been carved instead of painted." "Marriage to Adrian Blackwell will do that," Sophia said with a bitter smile. "It's complicated. Most things worth anything are." Thomas reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm here now, Sophia. Whatever you need. Even if it's just someone to remind you that you're still you, underneath everything else." What neither of them noticed was the black sedan parked across the street, or the driver who took careful note of their meeting and immediately made phone call. Adrian received the news while in a board meeting. His assistant's whispered message made his jaw tighten and his concentration shatter. He dismissed the meeting early, ignoring the confused looks from executives, and drove directly to the cafe. He arrived just as Sophia and Thomas were leaving, their heads bent together in conversation, Thomas's hand resting lightly on the small of her back in a gesture of easy familiarity. The jealousy that flooded through Adrian was so powerful, it actually made his vision blur. He had no right to feel this way. He didn't love Sophia. He couldn't. She was the reason his brother was dead. But watching another man touch her, make her smile, be the recipient of her attention, ignited something savage in his chest. He approached them before he could think better of it. "Sophia," she spun around, guilt and defiance warring on her face. "Adrian, what are you doing here?" "I might ask you the same question." His eyes fixed on Thomas with cold assessment. "You didn't mention you had plans? I don't require your permission for every moment of my day?" Her voice was steady, but Thomas noticed the way she had tensed, the way something fearful flickered in her eyes. "This is Thomas Rivera, an old friend from art school." "Thomas, this is my husband, Adrian Blackwell." Thomas extended his hand. Adrian shook it with precisely calibrated pressure, just enough to communicate warning without being obvious. "How nice that Sophia has old friends visiting. I'm sure you understand that her schedule is quite full these days. We have obligations." The possession in his tone was unmistakable. Thomas looked between them, reading the tension with an artist's intuition for emotional landscapes. "Of course, Sophia, call me any time. It was wonderful seeing you again." After Thomas left, Adrian and Sophia stood on the sidewalk in silence. People streamed past them, absorbed in their own lives, unaware of the storm building between the well-dressed couple. "Get in the car," Adrian said quietly. "No, I'll take a taxi." "Get in the car. Sophia, or I, will put you in it myself." She saw the barely controlled fury in his eyes and decided discretion was wiser than pride. The drive home was silent and terrible, the air in the car thick with unspoken accusations. When they arrived at the mansion, Adrian followed her inside and directly to his study, closing the door behind them with ominous finality. "Who is he really?" Adrian demanded. "I told you. A friend from school. Friends don't look at each other the way he looks at you. And how does he look at me, Adrian? Like I'm human? Like I matter? Unlike you, who looks at me like I'm something that needs to be punished and controlled. You are my wife." His voice dropped to a dangerous level. "You will not embarrass me by carrying on with old lovers. Thomas was never my lover. And even if he had been, what difference would it make to you? This marriage is a punishment, remember? You made that clear from the beginning. So why do you care who I spend time with? Adrian crossed the space between them in 2 steps, gripping her shoulders with barely restrained force. Because you're mine. You became mine the day you put on that ring. I don't care whether this marriage came from love or duty or revenge. You belong to me now, and I will not tolerate you giving your attention to another man. You don't own me, Adrian. No one owns me, don't I? His face was inches from hers, his breath hot against her skin. Your father's heart beats because I allow it. Your family lives in comfort because I provide it. You sleep under my roof, eat at my table, wear clothes I purchased. Everything you have exists because I permit it. So yes, Sophia, I do own you. The words hung between them, cruel and true and unbearable. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks, hot and unwanted. You're a monster. Yes. Adrian agreed, his voice suddenly weary. Yes, I am. Daniel was the good one, remember? I'm just the cold, ruthless businessman who destroys everything he touches. He released her shoulders and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, he looked lost. Younger than his years, burdened by weights, Sophia couldn't begin to understand. There's a charity gala tomorrow night, he said in a more controlled tone. Blackwell Industries is the main sponsor. You will attend as my wife. You will be gracious and charming, and you will not see Thomas Rivera again. Am I clear? Sophia wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Crystal. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, a glittering affair of designer gowns and strategic networking. Sophia wore a dress Adrian had selected, midnight blue silk, that clung to her curves and made her feel exposed. Martha had helped her with her hair and makeup, transforming her into the perfect picture of a billionaire's wife. Adrian appeared at her door precisely on time, devastating in a black tuxedo. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. And Sophia saw something flicker in his eyes that might have been admiration or might have been possession. She could no longer tell the difference. At the gala, they played their parts flawlessly. Adrian kept his hand at Sophia's waist, a gesture that appeared affectionate but felt like a brand. She smiled at the right people, made the appropriate small talk, felt like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by invisible hands. Benjamin found them near the champagne fountain, grinning widely. Don't you two look like the perfect couple? Almost makes me believe in marriage. He winked at Sophia. Save me a dance later. Before Sophia could respond, a voice called out from behind them. Sophia, is that really you? She turned and felt her heart stop. Thomas stood there in a rented tuxedo, looking uncomfortable but determined. What are you doing here? The gallery I'm working with bought a table. I didn't expect to see you. His eyes moved to Adrian's hand on her waist. May I have this dance? The tension that gripped Adrian's body was visible to anyone paying attention. Sophia could feel his fingers tightening on her waist, pressing hard enough to bruise. But they were in public, surrounded by business associates and society columnists. He couldn't refuse without causing a scene. Of course, Adrian said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. My wife enjoys dancing. Sophia allowed Thomas to lead her to the dance floor, hyper-aware of Adrian's gaze burning into her back. As they moved to the music, Thomas spoke quietly. Sophia, I'm worried about you. The way he looks at you, the way you flinch when he speaks. This isn't right. It's complicated, Thomas. You don't understand the full situation. Then explain it to me. Let me help you. You can't help. No one can. This is the choice I made, and I have to live with it. Thomas pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. You're not a martyr, Sophia. You're allowed to be happy. Daniel wouldn't have wanted this for you. The mention of Daniel's name was like a blade to her heart. Fresh tears threatened, but she blinked them back. Don't. Please don't talk about him. Someone needs to. Someone needs to remind you that life doesn't end because someone we love dies. We're allowed to keep living. The song ended, but before Thomas could say anything more, Adrian was there, cutting between them with barely concealed aggression. Thank you for the dance. I'm sure you have other obligations. Thomas held his ground. Actually, I was hoping Sophia might show me the terrace. I heard the view is spectacular. My wife is not a tour guide. Adrian's voice was cold steel. Adrian, Sophia interjected, tired of being discussed like an object. It's fine. 5 minutes of fresh air won't hurt anything. She walked toward the terrace doors before he could protest. Thomas following behind. The night air was cool against her flushed skin, and the city spread out below them in a carpet of lights. For a moment, neither spoke, simply breathing in the temporary freedom. "Come away with me," Thomas said suddenly. "Tonight, right now. We can be on a plane before anyone notices." Sophia laughed, a sound without humor. "Run away? And then what? My father dies because his medical care disappears. My family loses everything? Don't be naive, Thomas. Then I'll stay. I'll find a way to help you, to get you out of whatever agreement you made with him. You can't. No one can." She turned to face him, needing him to understand. "I married Adrian because I had no choice. And now I'm bound to him in ways that go beyond a piece of paper. This is my life now. I need you to accept that." Thomas reached out and cupped her face gently. "I can't stand watching you suffer." "Then stop watching." Before either could say more, the terrace doors opened with such force they slammed against the walls. Adrian stood there, his face a mask of barely controlled rage, his eyes wild with something far darker than anger. Jealousy had transformed him into someone dangerous. "Get your hands off my wife now." Thomas dropped his hand but didn't step away. "We were just talking. You were touching her. I saw you." "Adrian, this is ridiculous," Sophia started, but he cut her off with a look that froze the words in her throat. "Go inside, Sophia. Find Benjamin, and stay with him until I'm ready to leave. I'm not leaving you two out here to have some testosterone-fueled confrontation. Go inside now." Each word was bitten off. Sharp and final, Sophia looked between them, saw the violence simmering under Adrian's controlled surface, and made the decision to defuse the situation. She walked past her husband without another word. Leaving the two men alone on the terrace, she didn't see what happened next. Didn't see Adrian grab Thomas by the lapels and shove him against the stone railing. Didn't hear the low, vicious threats hissed between them. But when Adrian returned inside 15 minutes later, his knuckles were slightly red, and Thomas was nowhere to be seen. The ride home was silent again. The silence was different. It hummed with energy, with unspoken accusations and denied desires. When they arrived at the mansion, Adrian followed Sophia inside and straight to her room, the one that had been Daniel's. "What are you doing?" she asked as he closed the door behind them. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. You made your point quite clear, did I?" He moved closer. "Because I don't think you understand what's happening here. Then enlighten me, Adrian. Tell me what game we're playing now." He was directly in front of her now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "This stopped being a game the moment I realized I couldn't stand watching another man touch you. Couldn't stand seeing you smile at Thomas the way you used to smile at Daniel. Couldn't stand the thought of you belonging to anyone but me." "I don't belong to you," she whispered, but the words lacked conviction. "Don't you?" His hand came up to cup her jaw, thumb brushing across her lower lip. "Then why is your heart racing? Why are you trembling? Why haven't you pulled away?" Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She should pull away. Should slap him. Should do anything but stand there feeling heat pool in her stomach at his touch. But her body betrayed her, swaying slightly toward him. "I hate you," she breathed. "I know." His other hand slid into her hair, tilting her face up. "I hate you too. I hate that I want you. Hate that I dream about you. Hate that the thought of you with someone else makes me want to burn the world down. This is wrong. This is so wrong. Everything about us is wrong, Sophia. We've been wrong from the beginning." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the cold brush of lips at their wedding. This kiss was fire and fury, months of tension and denial combusting into something that felt inevitable and catastrophic. Sophia's hands came up to push him away, but instead fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. She kissed him back with equal ferocity, channeling all her anger and pain and desperate loneliness into the contact. They broke apart, gasping, staring at each other with something like horror at what they had just done. Adrian's carefully constructed control had shattered. Sophia's righteous anger had revealed itself as desire's twin. "This changes nothing," Sophia said, trying to rebuild her defenses even as they crumbled. "You still blame me for Daniel's death? You still see me as your prisoner. You're right." Adrian stepped back, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "This changes nothing. Tomorrow, we'll go back to hating each other." But they both knew that was a lie. Something fundamental had shifted between them. Some barrier had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. The foundations of their carefully maintained antagonism had revealed cracks that were spreading wider by the moment. Adrian left her room without another word. Sophia sank onto the bed, her fingers touching her swollen lips. Her heart racing with fear and something that terrified her even more. Hope. In the morning, everything would be different. But neither of them knew just how different until a letter arrived that would change everything they thought they knew about. Daniel's death. The envelope arrived 3 days after the gala, delivered by a courier who insisted it be placed directly into Mrs. Blackwell's hands. It was thick, cream-colored paper, sealed with red wax, and carried no return address. Sophia opened it in the morning room while Adrian was at the office, her hands trembling slightly though she couldn't say why. Inside was a letter, handwritten in elegant script, and a memory card. The letter began without preamble. Mrs. Blackwell, you don't know me, but I knew your husband's brother. My name is Rebecca Chen, and I was Daniel's therapist in the months before his death. I know what happened the night he died, and you deserve to know the truth. The memory card contains our recorded sessions. Daniel gave me permission to share them if anything ever happened to him. He was afraid, Mrs. Blackwell. Not of you, but of someone much closer to home. I've struggled with professional ethics for months. But watching you marry Adrian Blackwell out of guilt for a death you didn't cause has finally compelled me to act. Listen to the recordings. Then decide what to do with the truth. Sophia's hand shook as she inserted the memory card into her laptop. The first file was dated 8 months before Daniel's death. His voice filled the room, achingly familiar, and tears immediately blurred her vision. I don't know how to tell Sophia, Daniel's recorded voice said. She thinks my family is this perfect empire, but it's built on blood and lies. Rebecca, my brother is going to destroy everything our grandfather built, and he doesn't even know it. The things Benjamin has been doing, the money he's been stealing, the deals he's been making with our competitors, it's going to bring down the whole company. Sophia sat frozen as hours of recordings played out. Daniel's voice painted a picture she had never seen. Benjamin wasn't the charming, harmless cousin. He was a sociopath who had been systematically embezzling from Blackwell Industries for years, setting up Adrian to take the fall. Daniel had discovered the proof, had been gathering evidence to expose Benjamin, and had confided in his therapist about his fear that his cousin would retaliate. The last recording was made the day before Daniel died. Benjamin knows I know. He cornered me this morning, told me that if I exposed him, he'd make sure Sophia paid the price. He knows where her family lives, knows about her father's heart condition. He said accidents happen to people who don't know how to keep their mouths shut. Daniel's voice broke. I'm scared, Rebecca. Not for me. For Sophia, I have to protect her, but I don't know how. I'm going to confront him tonight. Try to reason with him one last time. If something happens to me, if I don't make it to our next session, please make sure this gets to Sophia. Please make sure she knows none of this was her fault. The recording ended. Sophia sat in stunned silence as the pieces fell into a horrible place. The argument Daniel had with her that night hadn't sent him out in anger. He had been planning to confront Benjamin all along. The fight with Sophia had simply been unfortunate timing. A moment of stress and fear that had nothing to do with their relationship and everything to do with the danger he was facing. Daniel hadn't died because of her. He had died protecting her. The revelation was so enormous, so world-altering, that Sophia couldn't process it. She played the recordings again, then a third time, until Daniel's voice was imprinted on her brain. Then she called the one person she knew would help her understand what to do next. Thomas arrived within an hour. He listened to the recordings with an increasingly grim expression, his artistic hands clenched into fists as the truth unfolded. When the final recording ended, he looked at Sophia with eyes full of pain and vindication. You need to take this to the police immediately. And you need to tell Adrian. Benjamin has been living in this house for months, Sophia said, her voice hollow. He's been here, watching me suffer, watching Adrian torture me over Daniel's death, knowing the entire time that he caused it. He's probably been feeding Adrian's hatred, keeping us focused on each other instead of looking at the truth. He's also a murderer, Thomas said bluntly. Daniel confronted him that night, and Benjamin either killed him directly or tampered with his motorcycle to make it look like an accident. Either way, he's dangerous. You need to get out of this house right now. But Sophia shook her head. If I run, he'll know something is wrong. No, we need to do this carefully. Adrian needs to hear these recordings. He deserves to know what really happened to his brother.
Oh.
Thomas looked at her intently. You still care about him? About Adrian. I shouldn't. He's been cruel and controlling and everything I should hate. But underneath all that anger, I see someone drowning in grief. Daniel's death broke him, and Benjamin has been twisting that knife for months. She met Thomas's eyes. Adrian deserves the truth too. We called Adrian's office and were told he was in meetings all afternoon. Sophia left a message marked urgent, asking him to come home immediately. Then she and Thomas waited. The recordings backed up in 3 different locations, the truth sitting between them like a live grenade. Adrian arrived home 3 hours later. Irritation written across his face at having his schedule disrupted. The irritation turned to cold fury when he saw Thomas sitting in his living room. What is he doing here? Adrian, please? You need to listen to something. Sophia's voice was steady, despite her shaking hands. It's about Daniel. Something in her tone made him pause. He looked between her and Thomas, saw the gravity in their expressions, and slowly lowered himself into a chair. What about Daniel? He left recordings with his therapist. Instructions to share them if something happened to him. They arrived today. She held up the memory card. Everything we thought we knew about his death was wrong. For the next 2 hours, Adrian sat motionless as his brother's voice filled the room. Sophia watched emotions cascade across his face. Confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally a rage so pure and cold it made her shiver. When the final recording ended, Adrian stood up slowly, like a man who had aged decades in an afternoon. Benjamin, he said softly. My cousin. My family. He laughed, a sound devoid of humor. He's been here the whole time, consoling me, befriending you, playing us both like instruments. There's more, Thomas said, pulling out his laptop. I did some digging while we waited for you. Benjamin's been working with Victoria Landry, CEO of Landry Industries, your biggest competitor. They've been planning a hostile takeover of Blackwell Industries for over a year. If Daniel had exposed Benjamin's embezzlement, the whole plan would have collapsed. Adian's face had gone completely white. Victoria Landry. Benjamin introduced us 6 months ago at a conference. He said it would be good to have friendly relations with competitors. He's been playing 3-dimensional chess while everyone else played checkers, Thomas said. And he's winning. Not anymore, Adrian said coldly. He pulled out his phone and made a series of rapid calls. Within an hour, his personal attorney, a forensic accountant, and a private investigator had arrived at the mansion. Adrian set them up in his study with orders to build an ironclad case against Benjamin by morning. Only after they had been given their marching orders did Adrian turn back to Sophia. Thomas had discreetly excused himself, citing his need to prepare for a gallery showing. Now, it was just the 2 of them, standing in the wreckage of everything they thought they knew. I've been destroying you for months, Adrian said quietly. Punishing you for something you never did. Blaming you for my brother's death, when all along you were as much a victim as Daniel. You didn't know, Sophia said, though the words felt inadequate. Should have known. I should have questioned. Instead, I used my grief as a weapon against you. He moved closer, his eyes searching her face. How can you even stand to look at me? Because I understand grief, she said simply. It makes monsters of us all. Adrian reached out and cupped her face with surprising gentleness. Daniel asked me to take care of you if anything ever happened to him. Instead, I made your life a living hell. I forced you into a marriage you never wanted, used your father's illness as blackmail, and spent every day trying to break you. You didn't break me, Sophia said softly. I'm still here. You're still here, he repeated, wonder creeping into his voice. Despite everything I've done, you're still standing. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Sophia. They stood there in the fading afternoon light. 2 people who had been forged in fire and trauma, finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. The hatred that had sustained them revealed itself as something else entirely. Grief for the same person. Transformed into a connection neither had wanted, but both desperately needed. What happens now? Sophia asked. Now we take down Benjamin, Adrian said with cold determination. And then, if you'll allow it, I spend the rest of my life making amends for what I've done to you. The confrontation with Benjamin happened at dawn. Adrian arranged it carefully, having his investigators present along with the police. They met in the study, It's the same room where months earlier Adrian had used his grandfather's will as a weapon against. Sophia Benjamin arrived looking slightly rumpled, but characteristically charming. "Adrian, what's this about?" "Your message sounded urgent." "We know everything," Adrian said without preamble. "Daniel's therapist kept recordings. He documented your embezzlement, your threats, everything." For just a moment, Benjamin's mask slipped, revealing the calculating predator beneath. Then it was back in place, though less convincing than before. "I don't know what you're talking about." Daniel was paranoid in those last months. Everyone knew it. "The financial records support his claims," said the forensic accountant, stepping forward with a thick file. "You've been siphoning money from Blackwell Industries for 3 years? $18 million total, all traced back to offshore accounts in your name. And phone records place you at Daniel's apartment the night he died," added the private investigator. "You argued with him for 47 minutes. Neighbors heard raised voices. Then Daniel left on his motorcycle, and 2 hours later, he was dead on that coastal road." Benjamin's charming facade crumbled completely. He looked between Adrian and Sophia, his eyes cold with calculation. "You can't prove I killed him. At best, you have circumstantial evidence of financial impropriety." "We also have your mechanic," Adrian said softly, dangerously. "Victor Mendez. He kept records of every job you asked him to do, including one very specific request about a 2015 Ducati Street Fighter. Daniel's bike. He's willing to testify that you paid him $5,000 to compromise the brake line." Benjamin finally showed his true face. Cold, ruthless, devoid of remorse. Daniel was weak. Always was. Painting murals and teaching children when he should have been building the family empire. He was a liability, and when he discovered my business arrangements, he became a threat. I did what was necessary. The casual admission of murder hung in the air. Adrian moved so fast that the police barely had time to intervene. He had Benjamin by the throat, slamming him against the bookshelf with enough force to knock books to the floor. "He was my brother, my family, and you took him from me." "He was in the way," Benjamin gasped, not even attempting to deny it anymore. "Just like you're in the way. Just like she is." His eyes cut to Sophia. "But I've been patient. I've been smart. This company should have been mine years ago." The police pulled Adrian back and snapped handcuffs on Benjamin's wrists. As they read him his rights, Benjamin's eyes remained locked on Adrian. "You think this ends it? You think arresting me saves your precious company? I've planted bombs throughout your organization. Deals that will explode in your face. Contacts who will turn against you. You'll spend years cleaning up my mess, and by the time you do, Blackwell Industries will be a shadow of what it was. Then I'll rebuild it," Adrian said coldly. "Just like I'll rebuild everything you tried to destroy. But you'll do it from a cell, watching me succeed where you failed." They took Benjamin away, his charm finally extinguished, placed by the hateful reality of a man who had killed for power and would spend the rest of his life paying for it. In the aftermath, Adrian and Sophia stood in the study surrounded by legal documents and evidence of betrayal. The morning sun was rising, painting the room in shades of gold, and for the first time since Daniel's death, the world felt like it might be capable of healing. "I need to release you from our marriage," Adrian said quietly. "It was built on lies and grief. You deserve your freedom." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, considering. Everything he said was true. She could walk away now, take the financial settlement he would undoubtedly offer, return to her old life. See Thomas, who would welcome her with open arms. Rebuild herself without the weight of the Blackwell name. But over the months, something unexpected had happened. She had seen beneath Adrian's cruelty to the shattered man underneath, had felt the way his grief mirrored her own, had discovered that sometimes the people who hurt us most deeply are the ones fighting their own unbearable pain. And somewhere in that recognition, in the crucible of their shared suffering, something real had been forged. "What if I don't want freedom?" she said softly. "What if I want to stay?" Adrian looked at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. "After everything I've done to you?" "Because of everything we've been through," she corrected. "We've seen each other at our absolute worst, Adrian. We've been cruel and petty and consumed by grief. And somehow, we're still standing. Still here. Still fighting. That has to count for something. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not. But you're going to get it anyway." She stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. Daniel loved both of us. He wanted us to be happy. Maybe the best way to honor his memory isn't by destroying each other, but by learning to live again, together. Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperate tenderness that was nothing like his previous possessive grips. This was a man clinging to the possibility of redemption, to the chance to transform guilt into something resembling grace. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I've been fighting it for months, telling myself it was just possession or control. But I love you, Sophia. I love your strength and your courage and the way you refused to break no matter what I did. I don't know when it happened, but it did. And if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I'm worth loving back." Sophia pulled back to look into his eyes, seeing the truth there, naked and vulnerable. "I love you too. I've been hating myself for it, but I do. Even when you were at your cruelest, I saw the pain underneath. I saw the person you could be if you let yourself heal." They kissed then, not with the desperate fury of their first kiss, but with something deeper and more enduring. It was a kiss that acknowledged all the pain they had caused each other and chose forgiveness anyway. A kiss that transformed their marriage from a cage into a choice. The weeks that followed were not easy. Adrian threw himself into repairing the damage Benjamin had done to Blackwell Industries, working 20-hour days to shore up accounts and rebuild trust with partners. Sophia worked alongside him, bringing her artistic perspective to marketing campaigns and her genuine empathy to employee relations. Together, they slowly transformed the company from an empire built on fear into something more humane. Thomas remained in their lives, a good friend to both of them, once Adrian stopped seeing him as a threat. The three of them would meet for dinners where they talked about art and business and healing, creating a new kind of family from the ashes of tragedy. Martha, the housekeeper, cried openly the first time she saw Adrian and Sophia laugh together. Her prayers for the sad young people finally answered. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, they visited his grave together, bringing flowers and memories. Adrian placed his hand on the headstone and spoke aloud the words he had been carrying for a year. "I'm sorry I failed you, brother. Sorry I let grief turn me into someone you wouldn't recognize. But Sophia and I, we're healing. We're learning to live again. And I think wherever you are, you'd approve." Sophia added her own flowers, her own quiet words. "Thank you for protecting me, even at the end. Thank you for bringing me into this family, even though the path was dark. We're going to be okay, Daniel. We're going to be happy. I promise." As they walked back to the car, Adrian took Sophia's hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that had become natural rather than performative. The mansion on the hillside no longer looked like a prison or a monument to grief. It was simply a house where two wounded people had learned to heal each other. "I was thinking," Adrian said as they drove home, "maybe we could turn Daniel's old room into an art studio for you. Real northern light. Proper ventilation. Everything you need to paint again." Sophia looked at him, surprised and touched. "You'd do that? Daniel would want it. And so do I. I want to see you create again. Want to watch you turn pain into beauty the way only artists can." "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for staying," he replied. "For giving me a chance I didn't deserve. For teaching me that redemption is possible if we're brave enough to reach for it." They drove home through the city streets as the sun set behind them, casting long shadows that would eventually give way to starlight. Their story had been born in tragedy and baptized in cruelty, but it had transformed into something neither could have predicted. A genuine love built on understanding, forgiveness, and the shared courage to keep living after loss. Benjamin stood trial 6 months later and was sentenced to 25 years for manslaughter, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Adrian attended every day of the trial, bearing witness to justice finally being served. Sophia attended with him, her hand in his, their presence a united front against the man who had tried to destroy them both. The Blackwell Empire survived and eventually thrived under Adrian's more compassionate leadership. The mansion filled with light and laughter as Adrian and Sophia slowly replaced dark memories with new, brighter ones. 2 years had passed since Benjamin's trial, and the transformation of both the Blackwell mansion and its inhabitants was complete. The house that had once echoed with grief now rang with different sounds. Sophia's laughter as she worked in her converted studio, the voices of dinner guests sharing wine and conversation, and sometimes, in the quiet evenings, The gentle discussions between husband and wife about their day. Adrian had changed in ways that would have been unrecognizable to the man he was when they first married. The ruthless businessman remained, but tempered now with empathy. He instituted programs at Blackwell Industries that supported work-life balance, mental health resources for employees, and ethical business practices that prioritized people over pure profit. Some of the old guard grumbled, but the company's reputation improved, and with it, their success. Sophia's art had bloomed again. Her first exhibition since Daniel's death opened to critical acclaim. A series of paintings exploring themes of grief, transformation, and redemption. One painting in particular drew attention, a diptych titled Before and After. The left panel showed a woman trapped behind glass, her hands pressed against an invisible barrier. The right panel showed the same woman stepping through shattered glass into light. Her feet bleeding, but her face turned upward toward the sun. Critics called it a masterpiece of emotional honesty. On a cool autumn evening, as golden leaves drifted past the studio windows, Adrian found Sophia working on a new piece. He had learned not to interrupt her creative process. So he simply stood in the doorway, watching her paint with complete absorption. She sensed his presence and turned, a smile lighting her face. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to remember why I fell in love with you," he said, entering the room. "You're transcendent when you create." She set down her brush and moved into his arms, fitting perfectly against him. This intimacy had taken time to build, layer by layer. As they learned to trust each other with vulnerability instead of weapons. "I have news," Adrian said, and something in his tone made her pull back to look at his face. The Daniel Blackwell Foundation received its nonprofit status today. "We can officially begin operations next month." Tears filled Sophia's eyes. They had spent the past year planning the foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting young artists from underprivileged backgrounds. It would provide scholarships, studio space, and mentorship, everything Daniel had believed in during his life. Now his legacy would live on, helping others create beauty in a world that often felt too dark. "He would be so proud," Sophia whispered. "So would you." "If you could see yourself clearly," Adrian replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You took the worst tragedy of your life and transformed it into something that will help hundreds of people. That takes a strength I'm still learning from." They held each other as the sun set beyond the windows, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The studio smelled of paint and turpentine, familiar and comforting scents that signaled home later that evening. As they prepared for bed, Adrian pulled a small box from his nightstand. Sophia looked at it curiously. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a new wedding ring, completely different from the one he had given her at their courthouse ceremony. This one was a delicate band of white gold, set with small emeralds that matched her eyes. Engraved on the inside were words in Adrian's handwriting, "Choose again." "I want to remarry you," Adrian said softly. "Not because of a will or obligation or grief, because I choose you, Sophia. Every day, I choose you, and I want you to choose me, freely, without any shadow of the past." Sophia's throat tightened with emotion. She looked at the ring, then at the man before her. The man who had once been her tormentor had become her partner, her equal, her choice. "Yes," she said simply. "I choose you. I choose us." They remarried that winter in a small ceremony in the mansion's garden, surrounded by close friends and family. Martha cried throughout the entire event. Thomas served as a witness, his friendship with both of them now deep and genuine. Sophia's father, his heart strong thanks to the medical care Adrian had provided, walked her down a path lined with white roses. This time, when the officiant asked if Adrian took Sophia as his wife, his answer rang out clear and certain. "I do. With my whole heart." And when they kissed, it was a beginning rather than an end, a promise rather than a punishment, a celebration of the extraordinary grace that allows broken people to heal each other. The story of Adrian and Sophia Blackwell became something of a legend in their social circles, though few knew the full truth of their beginning. They were simply known as a devoted couple, partners in both business and life, who had somehow found each other and built something lasting. But on quiet nights, when they sat together in Daniel's memorial garden that Sophia had designed, they would remember the darkness that had brought them together. They would remember the cruelty and the pain, the jealousy and the grief, and they would honor that darkness by being grateful for the light they had found on the other side. Do you ever regret it? Sophia asked one such evening, her head resting on Adrian's shoulder as they watched fireflies dance among the roses. The way we started? Adrian considered the question seriously. I regret the pain I caused you. I regret wasting months we could have spent healing together. But do I regret that we ended up here? Never. We were forged in fire, Sophia. What we have isn't fragile or naive. It's tested. It's real. It's chosen. Forged in fire, she repeated, liking the metaphor. Like steel. Like steel, he agreed, pulling her closer. Strong enough to support each other for whatever comes next. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as prisoner and captor, not as grieving strangers trapped by obligation, but as two people who had looked into the abyss of their own darkness and chosen to climb out hand in hand. The mansion on the hillside stood against the night sky, its windows glowing with warm light. Inside, a couple who had been broken by tragedy had learned the most important lesson grief could teach, that love. Real love isn't found in perfection or ease. It's found in the choice to keep showing up, to keep trying, to keep believing that healing is possible, even when the wounds run impossibly deep. Daniel Blackwell would have approved. After all, he had loved them both, had wanted them both to be happy. And in the end, through paths neither could have predicted or chosen. His final wish had come true. The story could have ended in darkness. Instead, it ended in light. And that made all the difference. This story explores themes of grief, redemption, and the transformative power of forgiveness. While it acknowledges the very real pain that comes from loss and the harmful ways people sometimes cope with trauma, it ultimately affirms that healing is possible when we choose compassion over cruelty, understanding over judgment, and love over hate.